Thanks to Card Market for sponsoring this video. Hi, I'm Marsh from StrataGames. This coming Monday on February 9th, in just a couple of days, there's going to be some sort of big announcement for Commander. This could be bannings, unbannings, or even rules changes. Commander doesn't follow any sort of specific timeline as to when they check in for bannings and things like that, as most competitive formats do, but it was announced during a weekly MTG stream that there was going to be some sort of update this coming Monday. The last major update was last April when we had 5 cards unbanned in the format, none of which made a major impact, which is great. That means we have 5 fewer cards we have to worry about on the ban list, and they don't actually affect gameplay all that much. So I want to talk about 4 potential changes that they might be looking at making, starting with the unbans. Are there other cards on the ban list that are not extremely overpowered and at this point could be taken off the ban list, given that we have a new bracket system and we have a game changers list, which is kind of in between cards that are legal and banned, making it so they're more restricted for lower brackets. I think there are quite a few that have a good possibility of not impacting the format all that much, but there are 5 specific cards that I think that could probably be unbanned without making all that much of a difference. The first one, and the one that I think that most people will agree with me on, is Biorhythm. Biorhythm acts similarly to a card that was unbanned last time, Coalition Victory. It's an 8-mana sorcery that just more or less can win you the game depending on certain circumstances. Now, Coalition Victory is 5 colors of mana and requires you to have a board with some very specific permanents, whereas Biorhythm can be played in mono green where you could ramp it out, and it just automatically kills any opponents who don't have a creature out on the field. And even if they do have a couple creatures, you can play it before you attack everybody with some big tramplers or whatever, as green is known to do. But let's be honest, there are a lot of 8-mana sorceries that just win you the game, even if they don't say that exact text. And generally, when you're casting a card that costs 8 mana, you should be winning the game with it. Craterhoof Behemoth already basically does this, and it's a lot more tutorable in green than Biorhythm would be. Of course, there are other ways you can cast Biorhythm other than just ramping it out. But again, when you get up to this high mana cost, cards are supposed to be extremely powerful, especially in a world with so much power creep, where often 3 and 4 drops are running the table. I can't really imagine anyone who would actually be that upset about Biorhythm being unbanned. Speaking of giant green spells, I think Prime Time has had its time out, it understands what it did wrong, and I think it would be okay to come back and behave appropriately. Yes, you could absolutely use it to get Dark Depths Thespian Stage combo, or a bunch of other land combos together, but you're in green and 6 mana can usually do that in a whole bunch of different ways, and this would just be a fun, iconic card that you could put in any deck that the majority of the time just ramps you and grabs a couple minor utility lands that are not going to alter the game that much. This is honestly the card I would most want to get unbanned, because most of these cards I think are not very offensive to unban, but this is one that actually would be actively fun. I really don't think it's going to make such a big splash that people hate what it can do, but it's a fun card that you get to play, and it's definitely hard to find playables for your lands deck, am I right? The last green spell I have on this unban list is Sylvan Primordial. I'm going to be honest, this is not the most fun card for me, and I wouldn't be playing it myself if it did get unbanned, but let's be honest, it's expensive, and it's a land destruction, which already fits into a category of a higher bracket. Technically, that's mass land destruction. I think 3 lands is mass land destruction. Kind of depends on where you fall on that, but blowing up 3 lands is a lot, and I know one of the biggest complaints people have about this card is that you're going to blink it a bunch of times, and that's going to blow up more lands. Then at that point, it's certainly mass land destruction. So this isn't the most fun card, but I think that it can be very properly regulated by being a game changer and or just a card that has a lot of stigma around it, being land destruction and all, that I don't think it would be that egregious for most people. My 4th unbannable card would be Sundering Titan, another land destruction card, but Armageddon's already legal, and for twice the price, you're blowing up like 6 times fewer lands. Yes, you have a little more selection over what lands get blown up, and if you do it in a colorless deck, none of those lands will be yours, but your opponent should already have killed you by the time you get to 8 mana, so is it really your fault for blowing up their lands? And finally, Limited Resources. The text on this card already doesn't seem really bannable to me. It is mass land destruction, and so again, it would have that game changer / higher bracket restriction, but allowing everyone to keep 5 lands is quite a few lands. You can do a lot with 5 mana. I know Timmy, who only runs 8 drops, is going to be pretty upset about only having 5 lands, but the majority of other players are still going to be able to cast 1 or 2 spells on every single turn. I think the most egregious thing about this is it has such a powerful effect for a single mana. This definitely feels like it should be a 4 or 5 mana enchantment, but hey, it's not the first wildly undercosted spell that has an outrageous effect that's ever been printed. Moving on to bans. There are 2 main cards that people have been talking about banning, as well as that have been put on a watch list of cards that might need to potentially be banned, and those are, surprise surprise, Rhystic Study and Thassa's Oracle. Thassa's Oracle has a weird ability where it takes like 50 words to say when it enters you win the game, and I've never really read all the in-between stuff there, but it is undoubtedly a powerful card card, and the primary way to win the game when you're playing CEDH, and it certainly creeps into casual gameplay sometimes as well. Rhystic Study is of course a powerhouse in just about any bracket that you're playing in, although it is a game changer, so it's a little more restricted at the lower brackets. Do these cards need to be banned? Maybe? I don't know. I feel like it's kind of a weird thing to ban them. I guess you could say the same thing about Jeweled Lotus, Dockside Extortionist, and Mana Crypt, but these cards have been around for a while and doing their damage, and it feels like it hasn't really been necessary to ban them for a while, as in the rules committee has not felt it necessary to ban them. I obviously know that we had a major rules committee change in the last year and a half, so I understand that comes with some differences, but Rhystic Study has been around since the beginning of the format, and Thassa's Oracle has been around since the beginning of the pandemic, which is an eternity, I think. Thassa's Oracle being a much more recent card does feel like if it needed to be banned, maybe it should have just been banned shortly after its printing, and maybe we've kind of gone beyond that. Then again, that could be the sunk cost fallacy, and actually maybe it should get banned because it's still winning an outrageous number of games. And Rhystic Study, giving your opponents a choice is sometimes better than not giving them a choice. Because if Rhystic Study just said 2 and a blue for an enchantment, all spells your opponents cast cost 1 more mana, no one would even blink twice about banning this card. No one would even blink twice about playing this card because it would just be not that good. It's a more expensive sphere of resistance that only affects your opponents. Not a bad card, but not one that's going to be stapled into every single blue deck that ever exists. But the fact that you allow your opponents to make the mistake of not paying the mana makes this card just very, very strong. I can't say I personally enjoy playing against this card when anybody plays it, and I don't play it in any of my decks, but does it need to be banned? I don't really know. Let me know your thoughts on the bans or unbans that you're expecting/wanting. But now I want to move on to the potential rules changes. There's one that I think everybody has on their mind and has been talking about that I want to go over, and one that I've been thinking about a little bit, but I'm not sure many other people have considered. The first one is obviously the hybrid rules change. Currently, you can only play a hybrid mana card if both of those colors are in your commander's color identity, but people have been discussing the potential, very calmly I'm sure, of allowing you to play a hybrid card as long as one of those colors is in your commander's color identity. And I think the logic of that is sound. A hybrid card, the whole point of an Azorius hybrid card is that if every single one of these hybrid symbols was changed to a white mana, the card should function flavorfully and mechanically as a standalone card, because you can cast it for all white pips. Similarly, this same card could be printed with all blue pips, and it would work just fine. And thus, if this card could be mono white or could be mono blue, why couldn't it go in a deck that is blue or white but not both? Logically, that is sound to me. However, I also understand that aesthetically, you are not allowed to have cards in your deck that don't match the colors of your commander. Elbrus the Binding Blade, you pay entirely generic mana for, but because on the backside it's flavorfully a black card and mechanically a black card, you cannot play it in a deck that is not black. So I think both sides have some merit to them. I will say I've seen so many people who are against the change who then show a Deathrite Shaman and say, so I'm supposed to be able to play this in my mono black deck now? And that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the talk, because while Deathrite Shaman is a black-green hybrid creature, it also has a black mana pip in its text box as well as a green mana pip. Those 2 pips in its text box that are not hybrid make it so this is a Golgari card, totally separate from the hybrid rule. So whether the rule changes or not, this will stay a Golgari card. Of course, part of the reason people are discussing this now is because Lorwyn Eclipse just came out, a set that is chock full of hybrid cards, as well as some cards that have the Vivid ability that care about having multiple colors of permanence on the battlefield, which gets a little bit hindered when you're playing a deck that is exclusively blue and red. This change is likely being discussed for the benefit of cards like Sanar, who is very underwhelming if you can only play blue and red cards in your deck. If you were able to play hybrid cards that included blue or red, then you could make use of its ability a lot better. But let's be honest, there are already dozens, if not hundreds, of legendary creatures who don't work very well as commanders, and you have to jump through many hoops to make them playable at all, and that's often a fun challenge to go through if you're willing to make kind of a janky deck. I don't necessarily have a huge horse in this race. There are not that many hybrid cards that I would drastically change all of my commander decks if I suddenly could include hybrid creatures, but there have absolutely been times where I've seen a card and I was like, this would be perfect in this deck if I could play it with these changed hybrid rules. A lot of people have been saying that if the change does happen, they'll just keep playing the rules as they always were before, and that's totally fine. for those people. Me personally, if I saw a card that fit great in a deck that needed to use the new hybrid rule, I probably would do that. I know people are passionate about this stuff. I'm passionate about it too, but rules change. When you added a mana to your mana pool, when there was a mana pool, if it was not one of the colors of your commander's color identity, it used to turn into colorless mana. That was a weird, janky rule that was trying to uphold the integrity and the aesthetic of your commander's color identity, but was ultimately just kind of unnecessary. And the eradication of that rule actually made way for some fun interactions when you steal your opponent's cards, and then they have like an activated ability on them that you're actually now able to make mana of that color for. You used to just be out of luck and never be able to produce a red mana if your deck was Dimir. People used to play Phantasmal Image and really any clone effect to act as removal for your opponent's commanders, because if 2 copies of a legendary creature were anywhere on the battlefield, they would both explode. We got rid of that rule and no one's really complaining because it's more fun if both of us can have a legendary creature on the field. And then obviously there's things like mana burn and damage going on the stack. But rules change. I think if the hybrid rule changes, as many people are having outcries about it now, I think in a year or two people wouldn't care that much about it at all. And 10 years down the road, people wouldn't even remember it, as a lot of these changes people don't. But I know this is a contentious thing, so let me know what you think about the potential hybrid rules change. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about is another rules change that I think might be on the docket to get implemented now or even in a couple months, which is sideboards. I don't mean actual sideboarding in between commander matches, because commander matches are single games, but I basically mean wish boards. We already made a minor step towards this back in Ikoria when we got companions. There is a sideboard zone, or whatever you want to call it, in Commander, because you can have a companion, and as we all know, companions start in your sideboard. So we already have a sideboard in Commander, it's just only utilized for one function at the moment. I could see there being a change to where Commander has a full sideboard up to 15 cards, or maybe they would limit it to more like 5 cards or something, that is there just to hold cards that are pulled from outside of the game, aka wish cards. The reason I think this is a possibility is twofold. First of all, wish cards are really fun and have had an extensive history of play in competitive environments over the course of their printing, and it's fun to put cards that are iconic and have unique effects into a game like Commander. In Kitchen Table Magic, a wish card basically says go look through your binder or your bulk cards and you can pull out whatever card you want. But in any more structured Magic, including something casual like Commander, you need to have some more set rules for that, and that would be a sideboard. Again, to keep it consistent with other formats, it could just be a full 15 cards, but that is a lot when you're actually not using them in between games of a match. So I think 5 cards would be all that would really be necessary. But the main reason that I think this might be a change they'd be making is because of the upcoming Strixhaven set. Because we're returning to Strixhaven, and we just got lesson cards, quite a few of them, in Avatar, I kind of expect we'll be getting more learn cards in Strixhaven, just as we got them the first time we were there. Learn and lesson makes for some very interesting decks and choices, but unfortunately, with Commander being the most popular format to play, learn cards do not jive very nicely there, because there's no wish board to pull cards from. So there's no lessons you can put in your sideboard to grab with these learn cards. Now, of course, learn also has the text that you can just rummage instead, but basically every single learn card is not very good if you always rummage with it. The whole point of it is if you don't have something you want to grab from your sideboard, you can rummage instead, you still get a little bit of value, but that's not the main use of the card. And if we're going to get another set with a bunch of learns and lessons, I feel like it's very possible that WotC is going to want those cards to be able to be played in Commander. And the way to do that would be to add a wish board. If this did happen, this would make it so that learn cards would have a place in Commander, wish cards would have a place in Commander, as well as some janky planeswalkers and other cards that also just pulled cards from out of play. This certainly would be a big change to Commander, and I wouldn't be surprised if they don't do it by any means, but I'm also not going to be absolutely floored if they do, because it leads into the main thing that they want to do, which is they want to sell more product. And how do they sell Strixhaven or any set? They lean into Commander players. That's what they've been doing for like 5-10 years. I don't know exactly when they started focusing on Commander, but it's been a while, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. Let me know what you think is going to be announced on Monday, what cards are going to get banned or unbanned, and if there are going to be any rules changes at all. I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.